Welcome. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Vitor. I graduated from Duke University from a double major in economics and computer science. Then I worked at an investment bank called BTG. I was a foreign exchange analyst and then worked a little bit with wealth management and was not super happy with that kind of life. I really felt the need to build something that could change the world. And I met David and Ed, were the two co-founders of Nubank in the very early days of Nubank, and immediately fell in love with the idea and with the team. And then joined in as a software engineer, then worked as a tech lead, engineering manager, and now I'm a general manager for NuConta, which is one of our products. So for those of you who don't know, Nubank is the leading fintech in Latin America. We launched our first product in 2014, which is our credit card. It's essentially a physical, real-world credit card. It's purple. It's very nice. Linked to a mobile app, so you could acquire the credit card through the mobile app. So that was our first product. After a while, we actually launched a rewards program as well. And then in the beginning of this year, end of last year, we launched our checking account, bank account product, which is NuConta, which is what I'm leading today. So with that context, going all the way back in the very early days of Nubank, the big question that we had on our minds is, how do we compete with this, right? And this is essentially like the big banks, the big experienced, rich, influential banks that are already in the market in a very really highly regulated market. How can you compete with that starting from here? And this is our Nubank's first office. And on top of that question comes from also the question around, how do I start from here, which is, a tiny little office just with engineers trying to build a digital product, to here, which is where we are today, which is essentially a fairly large company that's dealing with lots of money from millions and millions of customers in a way that people trust and people can rely on their day-to-day. So really changing people's lives. And I think this is probably the question on a lot of entrepreneurs' minds these days, is how do you go about really disrupting this market? And the way we saw it is the market gives you some hints on where you can get in, right? So the first thing you could see in Brazil is the inefficiency in the market. So these are our annual credit card rates for interest rates on the credit card per year, each of these countries, right? And you can see that Brazil is just by far, far, far much, much more expensive than anywhere in the world. And inflation can explain that. Our base interest rates risk-free rates can't explain that. The only thing that we can explain is that there's something really strange around the pricing of these products, and maybe some efficiency, better decisions, more competition could be the path towards decreasing that spread. So we established that the products are very expensive, especially credit products, but on top of that, you see that the quality of the customer service is really low. So this is a list of the companies in Brazil who have the worst, most complaints from customer service. So essentially the worst service companies in Brazil. And you can see that in red, you have three of the top banks. So in the end, you have very expensive service with fairly low quality. So that's essentially, hey, the market is saying that there's something weird. There's some inefficiency, super expensive. There's a lot of margin, but there's not a lot of quality. That's the recipe for disruption, right? But it's never just, it's never just, sorry, there's a message here. So the titles of this, so essentially it's the name of the companies, it's the number of complaints and how many of them are actually solved after the complaints. So lower resolution is worse, and so on. Thanks. So there are these things in the market that kind of tell you that there is room for disruption, and they're objective, and you can see it. You can ask a consultant to say, you see the inefficiency in the market, you see all these rates and these numbers. But this is, I think, where we really wanted to get in. So to explain a little bit what's happening here, this is a customer who's trying to get into a bank branch through a revolving door that has a metal detection. And the revolving door, for some reason, kept on blocking him, and he got so frustrated that he got naked. He just stripped down, got naked. And this is not the only time that this happened in Brazil. It's not the first time. It happens all the time. And the experience in Brazil is that it's so frustrating and sometimes humiliating to go to a bank's branch because people just assume you're going to be a robber. And treat you as such. And from our perspective, it was if you could get that same feeling, that same frustration, and turn it into something positive, turn it into love, into something that's constructive, and we can capture that, then we could really build something that would change the market. And with that in mind, so it was much more important for us to establish very early our values and what we were trying to accomplish, our core purpose for building this company. And to summarize, essentially what we wanted to do is to fight complexity and empower people. Financial service world is something that for a long time has relied on being obscure and difficult to understand. And a lot of people made a lot of money out of that kind of complexity. And what we wanted to do was to essentially strip down all this complexity and just be true and put our customer in the middle, have an honest relationship with them, and really add value to people's lives. And Nubank, so Nu in Portuguese means naked. It's not because of the previous picture, but it's more about being transparent. I have nothing to hide. And that drove and still drives to this date, all of the decisions at Nubank have been around what's best for the customer and how can we win together. And all right, that's very nice and all. It's very important for us to have a very strong culture and a very strong purpose in that vision. But how does that translate into actually solving problems? Like what are the tactics around actually tackling this big vision? So we essentially think of having 4 pillars. The first one is technology. So technology is all about operational leverage. If I can have all my processes happen in code and code be the master of the domain, the thing that really drives all the operational process through, I need fewer people. I have a lower costs in general, and I can be much more effective. Design is also about leverage, but in terms of experience, in terms of interaction, right? I can teach people about finance through design. I can lead them to better decisions through design. I can onboard people into this world through design. It's something that big banks, so big banks invest a lot on their branches, their physical space, and design is just equivalent to that for our world, for the digital world. Data science is all about learning quickly. So the one thing that we're lacking in the early days, and I guess maybe we still do a little bit, is lacking the experience to drive something like this, especially experience around credit, around regulations, around, essentially all types of decision-making that we needed to do. We didn't really have all that experience. So it was all about learning quickly. And the fastest way you can learn is just building models, looking at the data, iterating on the data, having quick feedback cycles within that data. So we really saw data science as core to our business. And the last is customer experience. And that, I mean, in one part is a consequence of everything I just said, all the other pillars, but it's also about saying, all right, people are going to ask questions, people are going to be calling us. It's core to their experience that we need to be able to help them. So we're going to have a big team that's going to be trained, it's going to be in-house, that we're going to build amazing tools, empower them to solve people's problems. If you look at it, especially in Brazil, out of these 4 pillars, 3 of them are very often outsourced to other companies. Banks don't see them as core to their business. So technology is oftentimes outsourced, design as well. So we actually, by solving problems, real pains, real customer pain, people fell in love with us and were essentially referring us to their friends. And to this date, most of our growth actually comes from referrals organically. It's not through marketing, through paid marketing. So I think that there's something around just actually solving pains and understanding that pain and creating that emotional connection that makes people just, become, just fall in love with their brand. And I think that's how we got to today is 5 million credit cards and 2.5 million bank accounts in essentially 5 years of existence. And we also became a unicorn. So we crossed the $1 billion valuation line. So it's been a lot. We've gone through a lot. We've been able to build something pretty interesting here. And I wanted to kind of deep dive a little bit on how we went about the decisions for our second product, right? So our second main product, which is the bank account product, which is the product that I'm managing today. So we started with a small team, and the question then became, how do we build a bank account, right? Building a free credit card that you can get on an app, that's one thing, because I'm giving essentially free money to customers. They don't need to trust me. They don't need to trust me because I'm giving them money. Now that I become a bank account, I'm asking people to trust me with their savings, with their salaries, and so on. And the use case also for bank account is fairly different than how people use a credit card. I no longer just look at their transactional life, I look at how they deal with their entire financial life. So we started thinking about it, and with every product in Nubank and every feature in Nubank, we started when just doing research. So these are 2 of our designers pretending not to be from Nubank, going to universities, and it was universities, subway stations, libraries, and to ask people, interview them for 30 minutes to understand how they manage their money, what products they use, what they like, what they don't like, how much they are capable of saving, and so on. Essentially, get a little bit of more of a connection to what are the profiles that we can see in the world. And this is naturally on top of other types of research that are not, that actually leverage a lot more. So running forums and asking people and actually getting market data and so on, just feeding that, creating that knowledge base for us to be able to make better decisions. And with all of this study, and this is something that actually went on for quite a while, we created personas. So personas essentially are profiles of people, essentially big categories of people and with specific behaviors that we wanted to understand. So what are their pains? What are their goals? What do they see? What do they hear? How do they feel? And how do they in what they say when they're dealing with money? So one persona would be someone who is an expert investor, someone who actually works at an investment bank, who has multiple accounts, trades, has day trading, and so on. So it's very fluent in everything financial and can actually manage their money really well. Someone else might be someone who really can't afford to save any money. Is just using their salary in the same month, and then how they actually deal with their money is very, very different. And then from this, essentially, we created 8 big picture personas, and looking at them, we kind of selected what are the people that we want to focus on, and what are some of the people that we're like, hey, we're not going to focus on you guys now. And the hardest decisions that we have in Nubank, it's always been about what not to do. If we could, I mean, if anyone could, we'd do everything. We do the best product for everyone at the same time. That's just not possible. Right? So with focus, we really believe that focusing on specific pains, specific customers, specific behaviors, we can actually drive a lot more value and have a stronger connection at first, then learn, iterate, evolve, and go from there. So this is essentially the MVP, and this is the MVP for a unicorn company team within Nubank. Even the slide doesn't look that great to really convey the message that it's okay to just throw something out there. And the MVP, essentially, we saw 3 key things that was consistent very strongly that we needed to tackle for the personas that we're focusing on. So one thing is people were very sensitive to fixed fees. They felt banks were charging them for fixed fees for just having an account or for making transfers, and that's meant a significant percentage of their income, and that was brutal. So we got rid of that. Essentially, no fees for you to open the account, have the account, or make transfers. The other thing is they wanted to be able to save money. They wanted to earn some interest on their money, but they thought it was too complicated. They couldn't really understand how to do it. All the complexity around the market was so difficult. They would get lost. Should I buy this fund or that fund or some equity or some fixed income? So that complexity just kind of got in the way. And the third is about availability. So for the segment that we're looking at, people were very sensitive to not having their money available at all times. There are some types of investments, for example, they need to lock their money for a little while, or it takes a little while for you to actually sell it, get that money in, and that money be available. For our target segment, they needed the money available immediately. So liquidity was very important. And with that in mind, essentially these big pains, the MVP was all about, all right, you make a transfer, the money comes in, it's already earning interest, you don't need to make any decision, it's going to earn the risk-free rate, which in Brazil today is around 650% a year, which is pretty good. And if you want to make a transfer back to another bank, we're not going to charge you anything. And that was it. So we started rolling it out, rolled out first naturally to our employees, right, new bankers and friends and family. We actually announced it to the world. It didn't look like that by the time we announced to the world, but the features were there. It was just those simple features that we announced. And from there, we started iterating, right? So the iteration on the experience, there are many ways you can do that. I can actually build something, an app, ship it, send it to prod, and then A/B test and have a lot of work put into that. And that's going to be valid in some cases. It's going to make a lot of sense in some cases, but depending on the type of thing you want to do. But at that early stage, that kind of investment was a lot of investment, and we needed to learn a lot quicker. And one of the ways that we did that was through just printing things down. So we would come, some designer with the team would think about a new experience, new features, things that they want to test, do a mock-up on Keynote, print it and then show it to people and say, all right, click here. What do you think is going to happen? And does this make sense? Are you confused? Is this helpful? What do you think is missing? So this was one way for us to have very quick feedback on the experience of the product, which was a lot of fun to do as well. And this is something that happens with every feature. Every week, we're getting in contact with their customers. We're sit down with them, we test, that we ask them questions and we start to understand what are the pains, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Creating that connection, the empathy with the customer goes back to that idea of I need to really try to put them in the center and create this emotional connection with them. And this is something, this picture, I think, is something that to me is very, very important, very, I don't know, it's something that I'm very proud of. So just to explain what's happening here. So on the right, you're going to have one of our engineers who's working on the product. In the middle, we have one of our designers essentially walking through a test of our product. And on the left is one of other engineer from Nubank who's blind and just testing the accessibility. And then when you see someone who's blind, who can't see, who has trouble using the app, and you're right there with them, walking through the process, that adds a whole nother level of how powerful, how important accessibility is. So that type of empathy that creates around interacting with your real customer, that's key. And that's true not just for specific cases like this, but this is, for example, our designers super happy, super excited that our product was running on the lowest end phone we could find in Brazil, the cheapest phone, because we wanted to have a product that was for everyone. We wanted to have a product that anyone could use. So making sure that it's working on very low end phones, making sure that people who can't see, maybe some people who can't read, right, can use your product. That's going to be very, very important. And for us, it's still very important. For every feature we build, we add a card that says, all right, the feature is, all right, add the button, change the color, do the experience, and then the last card is always, all right, add the accessibility functions and make sure that it's up and running correctly. And with essentially this feedback cycle, learning, evolving, this is essentially how the product evolved. So it started very lightweight, very basic, and then slowly the graph, kind of the evolution of your balance is starting to come in. We added some fun facts around how much your money is earning interest each year. We added transfers. We added some other payment methods for you to pay your credit card bill, for you to pay your rent, for you to pay utilities, and so on. And then slowly we're starting to polish a little bit more. We added the FAQ. We started making something that was more extensible, something that could allow for more features, all the other features they wanted to build. Then we changed a little bit on how to visualize your balance. We gave a lot more focus on the monthly view versus the daily view of your balances. We gave a very clear projection of what your money, how much your money is going to be, how much more you're going to make in the next 6 months. And then we got to where we are today, which is very lightweight, very clear, very simple, very extensible. So all these buttons down low, I can add more buttons to that. They're scrollable. If I need I'm more of a power user and I want to learn more about my balances and how it's evolving, out above, you're going to have the graph. You can click on that, and then you're going to have a lot more context. We found that just graphs and something like graphs in general, there's a segment of the population that finds that very hard to understand and interpret. And it's actually just showing a number. This is how much money you have. That's it. And then the feed, the transactions down below, and the actions very visible. That was the path for us. But we got to here by iterating, by getting the feedback. And this is not the final version, right? It's never the final version. We're always changing, always adapting, always running tests to do what's best. And this is just the entry point so because we have multiple products, we have the global view of Nubank, and then each of these products kind of have a little card. When you click on that, you're going to go to the screen of that specific product. And today, so it actually changed a lot, right? We evolved a lot. We started with a very basic MVP, just earning interest, doing wire transfers, and being able to pay the credit card bill. But now, and in this order, and understanding our customer, we added peer-to-peer features, we added deposits, we added direct deposits, peer-to-peer request money, utility payments, bank accounts. And yesterday, we finally launched what we thought was the missing feature for people to actually be able to abandon their other banks, which is a debit card and cash withdrawal. So essentially, after 2 years of work, we got to a place that now we have a product that is comparable, or essentially 95% has 95% feature parity with competing banks. If we didn't have the experimentational mindset, we didn't launch an MVP, we would just now be getting to the market. This would be essentially what someone with a very waterfall mindset say, I can't ship anything, I can't get anything out the door before having all of these things. And we believe that the most value we can get is getting something out, learning, and evolving from there. Because the market is going to show you a lot more information than any type of research, than any type of common knowledge is going to give you. And also, it gives the customer the feeling that the product is alive. The product is not something that's static, and also makes the customer feel that they're building that product with us, and they see that their voices are heard. They're asking for a feature, we let them know, all right, we're going to be working on this. We think this makes sense, and then we can just become this machine of delivering. And now I think we're at a point that we're actually can have a product for everyone. We can get a lot of people out of the big banks and actually bring millions and millions of customers to the banking structure that were previously not willing or not capable of having a bank account, either because of the fixed fees or because of the complexity around it. So it's very nice that we're essentially starting this new chapter, and I'm very excited for next year. So with that, I think it's just big context around all the things that we've done, and we have a lot of time for questions.
Yeah, so thank you, Vitor, for this great presentation. For all the audience members, if you have questions for Vitor, please put them in the Q&A box, and we're going to go through some of these questions. So the first question is from Pilar, and her question was related to, you were discussing a lot about the MVP, about the first version of your product. She was wondering more about like the persona, like what was the persona of the MVP? Mm-hmm. How did that evolve over time?
So the persona for the MVP, so defining it really came back to going back to the vision that we had, right? And how that vision connected, how the new product, so the checking account product connected to that vision. So we're looking to empower as many customers as possible and remove a lot of complexity to have a product for everyone that's transparent, that's clear, and it's empowering. So with that in mind, the two examples that I said was someone who couldn't save any money or someone who's very rich and an investment banker. We said, all right, the market is already serving this person who has a lot of money very well. And this person knows how to navigate this complexity. So there is not a lot of pain there. Like maybe there's some discomfort, maybe you could improve that, maybe there's margin for improving the customer experience for that segment. But there's a lot more we can do through technology, through the things that we've built in the past, to customers who either wouldn't have a bank account or who 10 reais or like a $5, $2 monthly fee means a high percentage of their income. So we're really aiming at younger audience. We're aiming at people who don't have a lot of money and people who are not very comfortable with finance in general. And the interesting thing about looking at that customer base, first, they're underserved, so they're going to engage, they're going to give you feedback, you're going to learn a lot from them. But it also forces you, it's a work around finding simplicity. So removing bureaucracy, removing friction. And in the act of removing friction, a lot of the times what happens is that you actually bring in other personas into your base. So maybe this investment banker was really happy with the lower friction experience that we have. And it's like, you know what? Nubank has such a low friction experience that I'm going to join them and use their product. We still have that core persona still as the key focus. And for every feature that we're building, we're looking at, all right, maybe this is something that a small segment of our population really wants. They're asking for it. But does it come back to that core persona? And are we solving the problems for these people? So we're still coming back to that core persona. We get other types of customers as well because of the simplicity and the synergies around it. But I don't think we really changed that persona so far.
Awesome. So we had another question that was submitted to us earlier about your relationship with the other banks in Brazil. So at the beginning, you kind of talked about, you had all these banks that you were kind of the new person in town. So how has the relationship with the banks changed over time, and do they perceive you guys as a threat, or have they started to adapt based off of what your business has been doing?
So I don't think it took too long for them to notice that we had something that was interesting and different and valuable. So they maybe 2 years ago, they really started investing a lot more on their apps, on their experience. They've even changed a lot of their pricing. When we launched, we were essentially the only credit card that didn't have a monthly fixed fee, for people who didn't make a lot of money. It was the only option for that. Now we see the market kind of adapting, other people kind of following the same trend. I do think that essentially now they see us as competition. They want to be better. And what's to me very, very good is that they're competing in great ways. They're competing, trying to really offer a better product to the customer. So they're trying to improve their experience. They're trying to improve their pricing. They're trying to be more lean, more effective. And for us, it's fantastic because it keeps us on our toes, it keeps us really challenging our ideas and really never saying, all right, we got it, and they're never going to catch up. We can't afford to do that. They will catch up, and very quickly. They're very good. And not just for us, it's really good, but in the end, it's good for the customer, right? Who the market wins, the customer wins. So it's been this kind of virtual cycle of increasing competition. So it's been pretty good. And on maybe related to that as well, what we see in Brazil is our existence also influenced the central bank to really be much more modern now, to really push like a very digital technological agenda and really support and change regulation to support competition and startups to pop out. So we're actually very happy that this is happening as well. So it's nice to see this whole ecosystem adapting to our existence.
Cool. So we had a question from Michael, and his question was around blockchain. So his question is, what do you think regarding the use of blockchain technology in your payment systems and Nubank? Is it something that you guys use? Is it something that you think about? What are your thoughts there?
So we don't use blockchain today. The use cases that we see for blockchain are not today the use cases that we see that there's customer pain. We could get more into details. I'll be brief in this topic, but because of the very nature of money in Brazil, all transactions kind of flow through the central bank, and the central bank kind of determines like, well, this money exists and this is going to this other institution and I'm intermediating it. And blockchain is all about distributed contracts that to make sure that transactions actually happen or that money exists and so on. But the very nature of money in Brazil, it's about centralized right to say that, no, this is the reality. I'm the source of truth. So with the central bank playing that role, in our current reality, we don't see for the day-to-day usage blockchain to be like that disruptive as it is today. We do see other use cases, probably around like FX, probably around removing this centralized arbiter of moving money, but it's not in the short term that we think it's going to happen, and it's not probably not going to start in Brazil either. But yeah, and internally also, the way we build our systems, we haven't had the need to use blockchain.
Okay. So we had a question from Hubert, and his question was, how do you get the funds to give credits to people? And I think that might be related to what you're talking about with the central bank. Like, how do you, provide these funds to your customers, and how does that work?
So, so I think maybe does he mean the funding around, because banking it's all about, I'll get a loan with someone, either another bank, or get deposits from customers, and I'm gonna use that loan to finance myself, and then I give out loans.
Right.
So in that sense, the funding, we started essentially just funding with equity, because getting debt in Brazil is very hard in general, but also hard for younger startups. And then later we created essentially what in the US would be essentially a securitization strategy, in which we essentially sell receivables, right? We sell some receivables at a discount, get that money in, and that money is used to fund the operation. In Brazil, it's called a FIDIC, but it's a securitization strategy. Cool thing about it is that this was a project that I actually worked on in the early days. We were essentially the first large-scale credit card securitization strategy in Brazil, and we also built that 100% with technology. So a lot of these processes are like spreadsheets, Google spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheets, and so on, and you have a manual interaction and control it in a very manual way. We built it in-house from scratch, and it was just like a little robot that knew how much money we needed. We would sell it, get that money back, flow in. So it's pretty cool to do.
Awesome. So the next question is related to marketing. So you had talked about the MVP. So how many people did you initially approach for the MVP? And then how did you end up, marketing the MVP or the product as you developed it? I know you talked a lot about word of mouth and a lot about referrals. Were there any strategies you used to stimulate the word of mouth and to get more referrals?
Yeah, so I think I'll talk about the early days of Nubank, because I think it's probably going to feel more close to new startups in general. So the beginning of Nubank, we first started with just friends and family, and I think we essentially had launched the product. We started the first beta tests April 1st of 2014, and it essentially was end of September when we actually opened to people who are not friends and family. And so by then we had about 1,000 customers max. With that base, with 1,000 people, you're already getting a lot of feedback and a lot of different profiles, and a lot of bugs that actually come in corner cases. So, but it's still manageable. So that was kind of like the initial size for that. And the reason why we actually created the referral feature was because at one point, just managing this, I have a new friend that wants to try it out on a spreadsheet was so hard and annoying. They're like, you know what, let's add something to the app, and eventually we're not going to use it. It's going to be like, let's add to the app so we can send a link, and the person signs up to our wait list or signs up to the product. And turned out that just kept on giving, to this date. In terms of creating incentives for doing the referrals, we never did any incentives, and we actually never really, only recently we started nudging people to, hey, are you sure you don't want to refer a friend and so on. The biggest reason for that, there are two reasons. One, it was working. We didn't need more than that. It was already just happening. But the second was we're building a credit product. And credit, if I start incentivizing behavior for people to get more customers, I could very easily get customers who are not close connections, who are just someone who's trying to play the game. And it could just dramatically change type of profile that you get. hopefully someone get more people in, and it could be some random person that they found. So that was a little bit also, we didn't want to break what was already doing well by creating incentive. We're also always very afraid of just these tiny little adjustments can have a huge effect. And at that point in time, we didn't want to take that risk.
Okay. The next question is about bank security. So how does Nubank handle bank security, and how has that evolved within your company over time?
Mm-hmm. I mean, bank security is a massive topic. I think the very quick version of it is we have a team of over 50 people who are concerned about security and fraud here at Nubank. The one interesting thing is people oftentimes assume that, oh, you don't have a branch, so maybe you're running a higher risk of someone attacking you or losing money or someone frauding my account or so on. And what we see is that just with the phone, you have so much data on that phone, like where we are, how you type your password, how you hold your phone, and so on. Data that you can't identify the person through that data, but I identify that it is the same person or not. Things like that. It can create controls that essentially like I can fall back into, I have everyone's selfie, so I can fall back into, all right, I need to recover my account. All right, let's have a live video and I can see you as well. So there are things around maintaining the account security that technology actually is very strong, even though the intuition would be that it would be weak in us to not have a physical presence. Because the banks essentially default into, oh, if I have a problem, come to the branch, let me see your face, let me see your documents. The other aspect of it is just like hardcore security around not being hacked by someone trying to attack us and so on. So being in the cloud, being on AWS, having a lot of, having an infrastructure that your systems are always changing. So I creating new services every day, new machines. It's very hard for any one machine that's compromised to compromise everyone else. Having immutable infrastructure, so you're not in your machine and changing and rewriting code and opening exploits on that is important. So every time you create something, it's from scratch. Like I kill that machine, bring another one up. So there's several things around that. I highly recommend, maybe then we can post, but there's a video of our CTO, Ed, kind of going through some specific things that we're doing around security. He was talking at this Amazon conference that was just happening maybe like 3 weeks ago. I forget the name, but this big conference about security. So there's a lot, like we could go on for days and days to talk about this.
Cool. So the next question is from Alberto, and he has a question on the business model. So could you tell us a bit more about how the business model of Nubank works and how that's related to the fees, or whether or not you charge fees to your customers?
So this is actually, it's interesting because when we're free, people assume that you're in like this hyper growth mode and you're not making money. And then sometime in the future, you're going to need to find a way to make the business model work. But that's not the case. So what happens is for each transaction, and this is true for any credit card in the world, if I make a $100 purchase, the merchant is actually only going to get maybe $98, right? The other $2 are split among the issuer, which would be Nubank, the machine with the acquirer, and MasterCard in our case. So that's the interchange fee. And that happens for every transaction. And the thing is, like, every bank also has that revenue. And what makes that revenue so valuable for us is that our structure is so lean. We don't have a big, investments, fixed costs on branches. We don't have like Itaú, the biggest bank in Brazil, has, I think, 100,000 employees. We're at 1,200. So that difference in efficiency allows for that small percentage to be very significant for us. And naturally, if someone is didn't pay the bill on time, then you have interest rates, right? And I'm going to still charge interest rates for someone who needs it. What's interesting though is that in Brazil, most of the people actually use the credit card as just a transactional product. So they're not going to revolve. They're not going to pay the interest rate. Most of the people just want a way to pay merchant, pay online, and so on. So the great majority of our customers are just interchange customers.
Okay. So the next question is from Adam, and he's asking about how much capital did Nubank raise, and when and how was it used?
Yeah, so by now it's been, I think, close to $500 million in total throughout the years.
Wow.
But yeah, I can double check that. But it's been so many rounds. But the early days, we raised, I think, around 2 million reais. And it was really about, like, big chunk of that was for the financial regulatory needs. So if I'm issuing a credit card, I'm introducing credit risk to the system, and there's some collateral that I need to give to MasterCard to be able to run a business. So part of that is just locked away. And then it was about, you know what, let's make the first transaction happen. Let's have the first customer. We didn't start marketing the product, like actually spending anything on marketing until like 2 years into Nubank. So most of the funds have been around just the financial machine that needs to keep on running, funding for the operation and so on, and staffing the engineering team. So hiring high quality engineers, growing that team. That's been like the bulk of it.
Cool. So there's a couple different questions around, I would say, like the founding team. So could you tell us more about, like, how did the founding team come together, mm-hmm. and how did Nubank grow in terms of hiring and mm-hmm. Choosing what kind of people to hire and where to fill the gaps as Nubank grew?
Mm-hmm. So Nubank, it all started with David, CEO and founder. So he came here to Brazil. He was a former, he used to work for Sequoia Capital. So he came to Brazil to try to open an office for Sequoia in Brazil. And what he found is Brazil didn't have that many engineers, that many startups at the time. This was a long time ago. Now it's changed. But he said, all right, but the market, the banking in Brazil is so bad, we need to do something about it. So what was clear to him is that he needed to be a tech-first, digital, mobile-first company. So he needed to find a CTO, high-quality CTO, and someone who's willing to take on this challenge. And through connections, he found a CTO, so Ed, who's a co-founder as well. But the other side was, all right, I'm not Brazilian. He's not Brazilian. He's Colombian, and he needs to open a bank in Brazil. How do I do that? So finding someone who's Brazilian with expertise in banking was very important. So he found Cristina, who's the other co-founder, who used to work at Itaú, running a big credit card portfolio in Itaú. And with that, essentially the founding team, the three founders were set. And then from there on, the next, 30 hires that were engineers and designers. That's it. No business guy, no marketing guy. It's been just engineering and design. And that's how I came in. So the very early days, I was a business guy. I was investment banking, but with my background of software engineer. And I talked to them. It's like, oh, it's awesome. We really like you, but for you to join in, you need to actually be a software engineer. Are you willing to do that? I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. They gave me a test. I coded something up. They're like, oh, it's good enough. Come in. And then slowly, we need to ship a product, have the first transaction, have the first customers. And then after that, it was the scope of Nubank just started increasing so much that new functions started popping up. And then my role started changing and evolve with that. So now being a general manager, kind of get the best of the software engineering experience, but also the building a product experience and running a P&L and finance and so on as well.
Awesome. So I think there are a couple of questions around like the legal issues and the legislation around starting a company like this. So could you tell us more about what was it like navigating the regulation of the banking industry in Brazil, and How did Nubank go through that?
Yeah, so the hardest part about it was that we were essentially the first company to try to do what we were doing, which is a launch a credit card product that's independent from any big bank and didn't want to be tied to any bank or didn't want to use the infrastructure of any big bank. So with that, there's no actual regulation that framed us and said that, oh, this is how you do it. These are the requirements for you to be able to run this. So it's been a lot about getting really close to the detail, learning a lot, and asking for help. So we actually used a lot of external counsel to help navigate the situation, but we just didn't defer that expertise to them. So in the process, we needed to learn and study, and that should be core to our business as well. And one thing that we learned in the process, which I think is still true, is that if you know the regulation and if you're really close to the detail, you can actually find a lot of innovation in that. So the regulatory framework that we use to launch the NuConta product, so the bank account product, was actually, we were the first company to use that framework to launch a product like this. It was the first in the market, game changing. How can you pay interest rates on an account? I've never seen this. What type of investment is this? But the regulation was there. I think it had been there for 1 year, 2 years prior to us launching it, but no one had considered using it that way. So I think there's a lot of innovation, deferring the regulatory side to the external counsel, who takes out a lot of the potential of innovation looking to that, but not asking for that help will leave you open to a lot of big, nasty things. So I think there's that balance.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So, what's next in the future of Nubank, and are you guys looking to expand the business internationally to other countries?
So the first thing that we're already doing, so we have an office in Berlin, and this is for acquiring talent. We're importing talent from the world to solve problems in Brazil, which is the inverse trend that you'd see in the past, in which people would outsource to maybe cheaper countries. We're actually importing from more expensive countries because we want the top talent to solve really, really hard problems and change an entire nation, right? So that's happening, and we want to expand that. And I think that's not the only time we're going to be doing something like this. We really want the top minds of the world trying to work on this problem with us. And then I think that the big thing is going back to the focus. We still have so much to do in Brazil that we don't want to lose that focus. We want to be able to, with conviction, say, all right, we have a path to become the leading bank in Brazil in the next so-and-so years. So that's, I think, a very high priority. So increasing reach in Brazil, increasing number of products in Brazil. We only have 2. Any big bank's going to have, I don't know, 40, 45. There's a lot that we can do on that side. And having said that, I mean, naturally, there are other countries who share similar qualities to what Brazil looked like when we joined in. So we do study things like that, but the thing I said in the beginning is the hardest thing about Nubank it's knowing what to say no to. And sometimes we need to say no to things that we really wish we could do, but because we want to focus and do it right, we say no to these opportunities.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have. I wanted to thank you, Vitor, for this great presentation and for answering all these questions. This is really a great e-seminar.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with the MIT Bootcamp.
Absolutely. And I want to thank the audience too for joining us today. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes of the Global Innovator Series, where we're going to be featuring entrepreneurs and innovators like Vitor. We're going to be sharing their stories and what they learned along their entrepreneurial journey. If you guys have any interest in submitting topics for future e-seminars, email us at bootcamp@mit.edu. And Vitor is actually going to be a coach at the MIT Technology and Innovation Bootcamp in Japan, happening in March. So if you want to meet Vitor and ask him questions in person, make sure to apply to the bootcamp. There's still time, and you can speak to him there. So thanks again, everyone, and until next time.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye.